I think we're on again. Yay. Thank you so much for joining us. Another Friday. I know I took a little bit of a break last week, much needed traveling, I have to admit. Went to visit some amazing places in Humboldt and Mendocino County, which was much needed. We have amazing state that we're living in, California, if people are watching from other states. So when it's safe, come and visit. Thank you so much for joining us again on Friday. So I am very happy to introduce you to another Sierra Club leader and another leader in the community, Max Perrey. And thank you so much, Max, for joining me. Haven't talked to you for a while, so we are actually been serving in the Sierra Club for a while together, and then, you know, time sort of takes us apart sometimes. So would love to catch up. So I know that you've been active in Marin County where you live. I'm not sure actually if you were born there and raised, which I'm happy, you know, want to find out. But you've been active in Marin County in the Sierra Club, and also Sustainable Marin County. Is that the organization? Am I saying the name correctly? You're vice chair right now, right?
Sustainable Mill Valley.
Mill Valley.
We are fiscally sponsored actually by Sustainable Marin. So.
Okay, great. I'm going to raise my volume because I can barely hear you, but that's probably me. So thank you so much for joining me, and I'm just going to jump in, and you know, a lot of things probably will come out during the conversation. So were you born in Marin County? Are you?
I was born and raised in Marin.
Right. Which where in Marin?
Marin General Hospital, which is in Greenbrae, but yeah, I'm actually a third generation Mill Valleyan, as we say. So
oh, wow.
My grandparents moved to Mill Valley in 1959.
Oh, wow. Ooh. I think that it's always interesting for me, you know, as an immigrant, to meet people who were born and raised in several generations going in California, especially because there's so much movement within, you know, people are always moving here, which is very unusual for me coming from Russia at some point. You know, right. People live in their apartments or houses for a long time, and sort of goes from generation to generation.
Well, I actually have both, because my dad's French, so he actually lives in France and is a French citizen. Oui, un peu, mais je suis très triste parce que cet été, c'est terrible parce que le COVID-19, et c'est, I can't visit my family.
Yeah, let's just stop right there, because if I start to exercise my French, I think people are gonna.
Conversation is in French.
Right. Yeah. Right. Well, maybe you and I, you know, get together and talk in French, but people are probably gonna leave this live stream really fast.
But what I was saying was that my dad lives in France, and he's French, and my mom is American and grew up in California. So I guess on my dad's side, I'm in some ways a first generation American, although I was born here. And on my mom's side, I'm a fifth generation Californian, since my ancestors came a long time ago. So I have a little bit of both.
Where in France?
So my grandparents are from a very small village in Franche-Comté, which is a region that borders Switzerland and Alsace and Lorraine. And my dad goes there to the kind of ancestral homeland, if you will, the small little French iconic village. But for the kind of winter and spring, he lives in Nancy, which is a kind of medium-sized city, about 150,000 people, I think. That's between Paris and Strasbourg.
Wow. Well, nice. Do you go to, I mean, not now, obviously, but
right.
Have you been there visiting?
Yeah, I try to go every summer, at least for a couple of weeks. My master's degree was in London, and so when I lived in London, I focused on European foreign policy and actually
Mhm.
climate change negotiations and the European
Oh,
Union's
wow.
focus and stances in the negotiations leading up to Paris Climate Accord. And so while I was in London and previously when I studied abroad in college in Edinburgh, I was able to visit a lot more, but usually I try to go every year and a half and visit my dad, and I have 3 aunts and many cousins.
France. It's France.
Yes.
I love France. I've been there a few times actually, and it's just really nice to visit. Of course, you know, first time when I went, oh my God, baguettes and cheese. Oh,
Mm.
good combination. Very tasty, but oh boy, I had to do fasting afterwards.
You have to go on long runs and bike rides in the countryside to earn your dinner for sure.
All right. Oh my God. But it was, yeah, it was fabulous. Love friends for sure. So wow, you mentioned so many things that, and I didn't know actually that you were involved. I know that you went to the London School of Economics, right? What did you study there?
So it was a master's program that was a master's in politics and government in the EU, but you could choose whether you wanted to focus more on kind of European elections or internal policies and monetary policies and finance and economics or foreign policy. So I chose the foreign policy route, and I'd done my undergrad in politics and legal studies, a dual degree at UC Santa Cruz. So I had a background generally in politics and American legal processes, but I wanted to learn more specifically about Europe. And it was a great program because you could choose kind of your focus even within that with your dissertation. So I was able to pull my environmental interest and passion in by looking at climate change, as I mentioned, at the UN International Climate Change Negotiations, even while learning about the EU structure and the EU processes and how we got to where we are today.
Mhm. You know what? I'm going to pause just for a second, but Virginia, our wonderful communications director of the chapter, is telling us that there's a little bit of a feedback. So Max, what I'm going to do, I'm going to probably mute myself when you're speaking. And if you can do the same when I'm speaking, that might help a little bit. So let's try that. So, and also if you can speak up a little bit, because I'm not sure if it's my audio or I want to make sure that people hear you loud and clear for sure.
Great, sounds good.
All right, I think that's better. We'll monitor. We're on Zoom, obviously, so Virginia is letting us know via chat what's going on. So we all on technology now. So thank you for bearing with us.
I'll do whatever Virginia suggests.
I think actually muting the mic, it seems like it's working. So let's see what she says. Sounds good. Yay. Thank you so much, Virginia. All right. Not just talk, start speaking when my mic, right? Oh boy. All right. Coordination. Left brain, right brain. So which year were you there in the London School of Economics? Not to ask you about your age, but to, give a little perspective, what was going on in the world at that time.
Yeah, it was actually a very interesting time when we're talking about European politics and global politics. It was 2014-15, so about 6 years ago now. And that was during the British elections, right? So it was the British general election for David Cameron running for re-election for the first time and ultimately the only time to be prime minister, right? And in that election, he was forced by the more right-wing element of the British Conservative Party, the Tories, to say that if re-elected, he would support a referendum on the United Kingdom staying in the EU. And that wasn't his natural stance. David Cameron was a relatively moderate politician, very pro-EU, very kind of outward-looking, actually had a pretty good track record internationally. And unfortunately, he was backed into a corner into saying he would support a referendum. And he ultimately won that election. And when he won, he had to deliver on the promise. And he said, hey, I'm going to go out and I'm going to try to get a bunch of reforms at the EU, right? I'm going to see if we can make a bunch of reforms that benefit the UK. The reality is the UK already had a fantastic deal at the EU, so there wasn't really much to budge there. He got a couple of things, small things, kind of symbolic steps, and he said, hey, we're going to have this referendum. I'm going to take these couple of symbolic steps, and I'm going to say that now I support staying in the EU, even though we're going to have this referendum. And people didn't buy it. And unfortunately, there's a lot of miscommunication, a lot of ignorance on the part of many people, where they didn't understand everything that would happen if they left the EU and the full ramifications of that decision. And ultimately, the British people voted in a very slim margin to leave the European Union. And that election was the year after I left. So it was a very interesting time to be there during that general election campaign when David Cameron was running. It also was during the Greek debt crisis, if you remember back to
Greek debt crisis. Yeah.
Yes.
I was going to say that, wow, what a time really to be in Great Britain. This is quite amazing, right in the midst of everything. So your perspective is obviously very interesting. I was like, I would love to hear what the ultimately, we're not going to have a whole conversation about Great Britain. I don't think that I know people are tuning in for that, but it's just unique perspective from a person who was there and just observing that. So it's,
yeah, I promise to the Sierra Club members watching, we will talk about the environment at some point, but it's
I think Sierra Club members and all people identifying as environmental and sustainable people, friendly people and interested in a lot of things, and it's all it all ultimately connected. Who's in charge is important, how the history evolves. So I think that we find.
and I'll say on that point, that's exactly right, Olga. We have seen in Great Britain, just as we have here in the United States with President Trump, where the whole country gets kind of focused on things that ultimately distract from the real work we should be doing, right? And in the UK, that's been Brexit, right? So all of the political energy has gone towards this discussion about whether or not they leave the EU or not leave the EU. Here in America, the conversation has moved to whether you support Trump or you don't support Trump, right? And so issues like the environment, which were being talked about both in the UK under a center-right conservative government under David Cameron, and in the United States under a center-left liberal government under Barack Obama, end up falling to the wayside. So, it's up to us as activists and advocates in the community and environmental organizations to try to bring that attention back to where it needs to be. And
that's an excellent point, Max. I really appreciate you making that, because yes, absolutely well said. Thank you.
Yeah.
And I interrupted you. We're going to say something else, but I just wanted to highlight that it's true that there's so many distractions that I think it's. And I'm talking about meditation all the time, but it's taking sort of awareness and meditation is like what is important, and also what I am realizing sort of in life and in leadership, and we sort of say those people did not get it. I think we also as a movement, as community, need to look at how to communicate things in a way that will meet people where they are and walk them to, and not everybody would want to walk with us or want to hear us even, but those people who are willing to hear our perspective, I think we need to find a way to communicate issues and ways and connections in a way that people, see our perspective and can connect with that, because I think we're so sometimes stuck in our own sort of righteousness and ways, and I, dealing with it firsthand right now is like, we really need to try different approaches and trying different, different metaphors and different ways to communicate what we think is important. So just wanted to throw.
Absolutely. And I think, the Sierra Club, and I would say at least the last decade, has done such a great job of showing up in communities that it used to not show up in, whether that be predominantly Black and Latinx communities and communities of color more generally, or whether it's coal mining towns in West Virginia with the Beyond Coal campaign, not just saying, hey, we want to shut down coal-fired power plants because we know they're not the energy that we need to have for the future, but also we're going to show up because we want to make sure that this community has good paying, quality jobs for the future, right? It's both. It's both. We need clean energy, but we also need good paying jobs for the people who work in the energy sector. And so, I think that approach where we show up and we support people on the ground and we support communities throughout the country is the right approach. And it comes from a place of listening and hearing, and as you said, ultimately communicating in a way that people will understand, not because they can't understand the arguments we've always been making, but because if people are struggling to put food on the family or are worried about their job, and they're in a place of high unemployment, and in the current situation, every place in the entire world has high unemployment due to the economic collapse from COVID. We have to make sure that we are tailoring our message and really listening and refining that message as we move along with this crisis or just in general. So that's something that I've been really proud to see the Sierra Club take seriously in at least the last decade, and something that, quite frankly, the environmental community hasn't always gotten right. And so I think that's something that's been such a pleasure to be a part of when it comes to the Sierra Club.
Thank you. You talking about that reminded me, I did a presentation once and, a conversation came up about the retrofitting of trucks in the Port of Auckland, which was overall the right thing to do because, people in West and East Auckland, suffering from huge air pollution. And so, but one of the people in the audience, we had pretty, candid conversation. Person said, my father is a truck driver, and that was a huge financial burden for him and for the whole family so when there was a conversation. It was like, when we push for environmental laws and regulations and imposing certain things on people, how do we also stand in their shoes and think, okay, if I was, what would be helpful to me? What subsidies do I need to get? So not, I think that sometimes we're so like, we're saving the world, which we are. I think everybody who's working in environmental protections, ultimately we're we're working towards saving humanity because, we cannot exist without our natural world. And we also, you're right, need to be more humble in that way and sort of go to the communities that maybe we didn't grow up in and don't quite understand all the issues and concerns. So yeah, very good point. Well, I appreciate, so you also mentioned your work with the UN. Do you want to say a little bit more about that? Because that's obviously very exciting and sort of, I haven't been to UN meetings. So for me personally, it's like, wow, exciting to hear.
I've never been to the UN. I did my master's dissertation looking at the UN process leading up to the Paris Climate Accords. So, that process started in 1992 in Rio and has continued with, what you call COP, the Conference of Parties, every year since. And there's some that have been more household names like Kyoto, where the Kyoto Protocol came out of, and Paris, where the Paris Climate Accord came out of. But there were other monumental ones in Copenhagen and Madrid and and other situations where this conference of parties met and came up with a set of agreements. And unfortunately, in the last couple of years, it's been about implementation, the United States has been a little bit removed from that. And so, as we go forward, hopefully, if we elect a new president, we can start being an active leader in that process. So that's
when we elect new president, when we elect.
when we elect a new president, hopefully this year, we will be back engaged in that process. But personally, I've never worked at the UN or worked in that process, but I know that the Sierra Club has had a presence at COP, not just COP21, which was Paris, but going back many years and since has had a presence as an advocate and a partner to that process. So,
as we should be, yes, I agree. So it's a very unfortunate situation with the United States, and of course we can do so many things. So where are you concentrating now? I want to know a little bit more about your also sort of background and why did you even choose that study, or so what in your childhood and your upbringing brought you into that? Because not too many young people. I mean, I want everybody to be environmentalists. So clearly there was something that brought you to that movement. So I would like to know what was it, you think?
Yeah, what was the origin story? Well, I think for me, there was like for so many people, an iconic kind of issue that gravitated me to the environmental movement, and that was a seasonal wetlands about 10 minutes from where I grew up here in Marin County. And the seasonal wetlands was going to be destroyed. And there was a frog pond, some tidal wetlands, but it was the last seasonal wetlands in all of southern Marin County. And I had gone there as a kid and had, played in that area and gotten to know the ecology. And I think, like so many people who ultimately become environmentalists, it starts observing and appreciating nature, right? And so, having been there many times as a 2-year-old, 3-year-old, 4-year-old, 5-year-old, hearing that it was going to be lost forever and replaced with something that was completely unnecessary. It was a regulation-sized soccer field. There happened to be exactly that across the street, literally across the street. I decided that I needed to do something. So I galvanized some friends. I contacted the local Sierra Club. I contacted the local Audubon Society, the Marine Conservation League, and we put together a protest on site. And we had a petition. We gathered signatures from those who attended. We gathered additional signatures, I think by going door to door or gathering them at the local market. And we went and presented at the public meetings where they were considering the fate, whether that was BCDC, the Bay Area Development and Conservation Corps, had to vote on it, the Marin County Board of Supervisors had to vote on it, and the local school district whose property it was, the local school board had to vote on it. Ultimately, all of them voted the wrong way, but in that process, was able to connect with these amazing people, truly legends, who have served as mentors to me in the years since, who had to give up on this issue and move on to the next one, right? They were fighting 10 battles at once, and I didn't understand why they didn't have a protest there themselves, right? But they had written letters, they had attended meetings, they had talked about the issue, researched it, they had, looked into the legal aspects. They had done all of that before I came along. And so I was able to bring some new energy, change the conversation a little bit in the press, so it wasn't, these, curmudgeon-y people who just want to save the frog versus the kids who want to play in the playground, right? And want to run on the soccer field. We changed it from that because here were some kids, right? I think I was 14 or 15 at the time, who wanted to save the wetlands because that's what they valued, right? And, I'm a millennial, but you see Generation Z now stepping up and fighting for our natural environment all the time. But even just, a decade and a half ago, when I was a kid, when I was 15 and doing this, we had, that wasn't as common. And so that was able to get some press, be in the newspaper. I was on the KPFA Evening News at 6, interviewed. We were able to change
At 15, 16. Wow, that's great.
Yeah,
Oh.
15 years old. So that was the first issue. And then it went away. And I was
actually, I want to know. So how did it go? I mean, if all the deciding bodies, and that's why it's so important. And I want to talk a little bit about politics now, because you've been involved in politics. You ran for elected office. If all the elected bodies voted the wrong way, well, it's not a wrong. It's like I should really training myself to refrain from the most wrong. Why, right? And I think to your earlier point, we need to see all the points and see how we can find solutions that would, provide for the kids and also save our environment, and how to, I see again, firsthand right now how those issues are so, colliding sometimes, and how to really communicate in a way that's it's not either or, and it's also we need to people, and their needs, if we even have a hope for any kind of other communication about the environment, they need to save the environment. So anyway, what happened? How did it get resolved? How did the wetland is still there, right? So
the wetlands destroyed. There's no frogs, no happy fish. It's not a happy story here, Olga. But the good news is that it captivated the imagination, not just of me, but of many people. And, we ultimately, me and the people who I engaged in the process, were able to fight on the next issue. And, it was devastating, of course. And if you go there now, it is not something that you want to see if you knew the rich ecosystem that it used to be. But it taught me personally, and hopefully others, that you do have a voice, and you can get on the evening news if you want, and if you want to make a point that's not being made, you can help influence that conversation. So the next issue that I looked at was ultimately successful, and so you end up, you win some, you lose some. And unfortunately for me, the first one was a loss, but I was able to learn from it. And the second issue that I spent a lot of time working on was the light brown apple moth spray program. Arnold Schwarzenegger was our governor at the time, and the CDFA, the California Department of Food and Ag, wanted to spray or deposit chemicals in the air out of airplanes through these little supposedly biodegradable, but they were ultimately found in the environment.
Apple moss or something, is that the issue? Yeah. Oh boy, yes, I remember that was.
Yes. So this was 2007, 2008. They had sprayed Monterey and Santa Cruz counties with disastrous results. People were calling in sick. Over 600 birds were mysteriously found dead. The capsules that were supposed to biodegrade in a number of days were found in the waterways. It was not the situation they were hoping for. They were, imagining, they being the CDFA, was imagining that, there would be this deposit of this kind of innocuous product. No one would really notice. No one would really care. No one would really, say anything, and that would be it, right? And that was the test case to take it from a predominantly agricultural community of those two counties and move it to the urban Bay Area, where there had been zero tests or zero studies looking at what the effects could be, and bringing it and spraying it on San Francisco and Marin and Alameda and Contra Costa counties. And So, we said, we being every person, with with the brain, I almost want to say, but
yeah, be careful what you say, right? But anybody who thinks is like, oh my God, they're going to be
no,
spraying.
but on this issue,
Yeah.
everyone said no. And when I say everyone, I every person running for state senate that year was vehemently against it. Every person at the local level in government was vehemently against it. We had a town hall that I helped put together at the local senior center. Hundreds of people came out because they wanted to learn about it and they were outraged. Kids were out marching in the streets. We had over 1,000 people on the Golden Gate Bridge holding signs, and a huge rally at Chrissy Field. We had a concert, a benefit concert to fund the legal case in Sausalito. The land was donated to us by a large property owner who was outraged by this happening. There were famous musicians who donated their time to come sing. People paid lots of money to sponsor and attend and buy swag to support the effort. And so, here I was, now 16 years old. I was able to be on the board of this emergent group, Stop the Spray Marin. We had sister organizations all around the Bay Area, and help guide the messaging around what we were going to do. I ended up being chair of our events committee. We held amazing events. We had a Mother's Day march on Mother's Day with hundreds of mothers and fathers and kids saying, we don't want this for our health. And so, it was an experience that was not only gratifying because of all the reasons that I talked about with the seasonal wetlands fight, but it was gratifying because ultimately we won. Schwarzenegger backed down. We were not sprayed. Taxpayers declared $72 million that were going to go towards this program that was completely unnecessary. The light brown apple moth was never a pest that threatened agriculture or any sort of crops in the Bay Area or even in the Central Valley. I think 3 light brown apple moths were found in the Central Valley previous to the spray program. It did not become an emergent threat. And other processes for dealing with our pests have been promoted since then. I was part of an effort when I worked at the County of Marin called Yard Smart Marin in 2016 and 17. It's still active today, educating people about alternatives to pesticide use, alternatives to toxins. There are programs in every one of the cities, not only in Marin, but around the Bay Area, called integrated pest management, looking at, the best and most effective way of dealing with a pest and looking at the root problems of why you have pests versus just grabbing the bottle of toxins every single time. And so, I think that there has been a movement. It obviously existed well before the light brown apple moth spray program, but that fight ultimately galvanized a new generation of moms and dads and kids. And I was one of those teenagers that was involved in that, that hadn't been active in the toxin fights previously. And so that was an incredible experience to be a part of.
Those are huge cases, and this is amazing that you were able to participate in those. I remember very well the fight for the brown moth. It sounded ridiculous. Yeah, absolutely right. But some people obviously think that it's not, and it's amazing that sometimes so many times things just slip under the radar, and companies, it benefits somebody, it benefits companies who are producing all of those chemicals, obviously. So, and a lot of things are slipping under the radar, and those companies and some politicians, I guess, think that they're not going to notice. And then they're always so surprised that there's such an outcry. And I think that's why it's so important to have organizations that are constantly monitoring, what's being put on the agenda, because a lot of those, people, we always galvanize around presidential elections and big elections, like, pay attention to your local boards, your school board, your planning commission. A lot of things are getting passed at the level of the planning commission. Mm-hmm. or other commissions that are elected bodies, but people are not paying attention, and they are deciding life at the local level and the more regional level for all of us. So I highly recommend, if people want to get engaged in nonprofit organizations that are politically active, and also to look, go to your city's website and see what commissions and committees are there, and what are their priorities, and what do they do in your community. I think that's tremendously important. And thank you, Max, for getting involved and for galvanizing other people, obviously. So, and one of the things that I also draw in parallels, I think that, I had a conversation with Julia Foot from, our organizer within the chapter, and she said something that was so profound. And I think that I sort of knew it, but hearing it from her, it was so profound that she said, my generation really has to plan everything we do with that thought in mind, that there is a climate change and things are changing. So they have to really make their decisions, even decisions whether or not to have kids, or whether or not to, which profession to go to. I mean, all of that, or those decisions that we sort of had the luxury, some of us, I'm not, I'm also obviously saying from my perspective, and I know that there are a lot of people who haven't had that luxury, to make decisions on their own. I'm very aware of that. And now I think more and more young people from all demographics, from all socioeconomic circles, are really starting to realize that they are in the heart of it, and they have to act, and their whole lives are influenced by that. And that's, I think that hopefully it's not going to be too late, and hopefully a lot more people are going to get engaged and really actively participate. So thank you for listening to my monologue, but it was, you sort of within that generation also, unfortunately. So you're young. I mean, I wasn't asking about your age, but
I'll be in my 30s in April.
Oh wow! In next April?
Next April, yeah, I'll be 30.
All right. Well, welcome to the.
Where did my youth go? I don't know.
Organizing. That's great. So, were your parents involved in any kind of political organizing or environmental organizing?
Yeah, I mean, my mom always, I think imbued in me, progressive and environmental values, partly just through, experience of being out in nature and, being in places where there were rich ecosystems. And I think it's hard to grow up in a place like where we live in the Bay Area, where, even if you're in an urban center, you look and the bay is nearby, or a mountain range is viewable from downtown San Francisco to downtown Oakland to Richmond, to San Rafael, to Santa Rosa. Our bigger and medium-sized cities all have nature close at hand, at least viewable. And obviously we need to work a lot in terms of access, in terms of how people access nature. But growing up in Marin, it's just down the street. And so for me, growing up in that environment, I couldn't not appreciate nature. And though, my mom and my parents weren't, at the city council every single meeting, or, attending protests every Saturday, I took some of that value of nature and what needs to be protected, and was able to do something with it, and have amazing support in that process.
Yeah, it's I always say that, and actually not my phrase, but I don't think we want to protect what we don't know. So and it's partially why I'm in sort of an environmental movement. I think is because it's like as a child, tadpoles, I was just playing with nature and touching it and feeling it and smelling and then sort of witnessing it. It's just such a amazing world we're living in. And you're right. We are so close to everything, and yet I just can't, again, just getting present to the fact that a lot of people have been living here and wouldn't have access, especially kids, if they live in areas where there's no bus going to East Bay Regional Park or, somewhere in Marin, or their parents cannot take them because they're working several jobs. And I think that also increasing that access and us doing everything we can to make sure that kids and adults get to see that beauty and enjoy it, and also understand it's important in protecting the world. So what are you working on now? What is sort of exciting? We're in such a immense time right now that how are you coping? How are you what are you doing to stay grounded and centered and productive?
Yeah, well, just on that last point, I just want to echo, what you said in terms of that kind of dual purpose, and that's actually what drew me to the Sierra Club, is that dual purpose of getting people out in nature, whether it's through hiking groups or I think the SF Bay chapter now has a biking group. We have snow camping sections. We, lead whitewater rafting programs for kids from cities and bike, backpacking trips and wilderness trips, right? And that on top of environmental advocacy, trying to protect the places that we go and we visit and we enjoy, right? And then on top of that, being politically active so that we have elected officials and people in government who will actually enact the policies that we need to protect those places. And so it's, it's all three, right? It's getting out into nature and helping people get to nature who otherwise might not, or who just simply want a community to go into nature with. And then on top of that, advocating for it and then electing people who can do the same. And so that's always been, to me, what the Sierra Club is about. And it's in the mission, right? It's enjoy, explore, and protect. And that's why, I was gravitated, initially to the Sierra Club, and why I've stuck with it for so many years, is that it's all three. And, on these local races, I mean, as you said, with, everything from, a city council to a county board of supervisor, even up to governor, oftentimes there's one or two environmental organizations that endorse, right? Maybe California League of Conservation voters will endorse, but oftentimes in the local races, they don't. And that leaves it often to just the Sierra Club. And, I was a candidate in the recent election in Mill Valley and was endorsed by the Sierra Club. And that, mattered a lot because no other environmental organization endorsed in the race. And so when people said, oh, how can I trust you? Or, what's your views? And I'm talking about environmental issues. And they said, oh, what have you worked on? And I talked a little bit about my experience. That's all fine. But to say, and the Sierra Club understood that as well, and they too recognize that and are supporting me, meant a lot to a lot of people. And I've seen that in dozens of races where I've supported a candidate or a ballot measure. When the Sierra Club stands on that, it means that the people who know nature the best, who know what it takes to protect our natural environment, are saying, oh, you better pay attention and vote yes or no on this ballot measure in this way or that, that holds, a center of trust for a lot of voters. And so that to me is one of the best aspects of it. And, in terms of what, grounds me, is the knowledge that, even in the face of all of the challenges we have, all of the, adversity that the environmental movement and the progressive movement has had to face during, the Trump administration and rising temperatures and rising seas and everything else that we're dealing with, loss of biodiversity, et cetera, we have small wins, and sometimes we even have big wins. And we have to take the power that comes with those wins and channel them into additional gains for the movement and for our natural environment. And just taking some recent examples, seeing what's happened on the issue of waste, which has always been important to me. I used to be on the SFBA chapter Zero Waste Committee. That was the first committee I was on for the chapter.
I don't know how this issue cannot be important to everybody, because everywhere you go, I can say I'm getting upset, honestly, because I'm bringing a glove with me to pick, to pick things up. And I was like, that's not what want to be doing when I'm visiting natural, environments. I want to enjoy them just like so yes, that's becoming so upsetting. So, and of course with COVID, so many stores are going back to using plastic bags and not allowed to bring your own containers or bags. And it's just like, how can we, it's like, preserve safety and make sure that people are safe, and also at the same time, make sure that we not destroy the planet in the same time. Anyway, Max, I interrupted you, but I was like, this is such an issue that is huge.
Yeah. It's a huge issue, and it's one that I think we've made steady progress on, right? So a decade ago, cities started banning plastic bags, and in Marin County, that was in 2010, 2009, 2010. Those were the years where there was a whole movement of people who said, hey, enough is enough. We don't need these bags, right? When we go to the grocery store, we want it to be mandatory that you bring your own. And if you forget it, well, you can purchase one that then you can reuse, whether that's a paper bag or some sort of hard plastic bag that can be used. I think it ultimately was mandated 150, 160 times. And so, that's a small step, right? And, so we passed that in Marin. San Francisco passed it. Some cities in the East Bay passed it. Some cities in Southern California. And then the state said, hey, this should really be statewide. It doesn't make a lot of sense to have this patchwork of different regulations. Let's make this statewide. And, that's how you ultimately make really great policy, is you take the best local policy that's proven to be effective at addressing the issue that it sought out to make an impact on, in this case, plastics and waste, and you build it, right? And so maybe one day we can get to a place where, just like New Zealand and France, we can have a nationwide ban, and plastic bags will be no more. And obviously there's going to be situations like with COVID where, plastic bags may come back momentarily, but, looking at the arc of time, plastic bags have gone by the wayside, and people have moved on from them. No one feels the need to have a bag, purchase that's single use that goes immediately into the waste stream when they go and buy a couple of items from the store. And, we're seeing that now with straws. We're seeing that now.
New Zealand and Australia they've banned all the single-use plastics. Is that correct, or am I?
So different communities have taken on, different policies. Here in Marin County, 3 of our local towns, we have 11 cities and towns in Marin County, 11 municipal governments. 3 of them have adopted foodware ordinances. Sausalito, San Anselmo, and Fairfax. And we're looking to bring it to the other 8 cities, along with the county of Marin, which covers all of the unincorporated areas in between the cities, and all of Western Marin County, which is not incorporated into a city structure. And what the ordinance basically says is, hey, if you're going to sit on site, you have to have a reusable, washable plate, cutlery, glass, etc. You can't have a bunch of takeout materials and then sit on the premise and use them and then throw them in the trash. And if you're going to get takeout, that's fine, but let's have some regulation around that takeout material being accepted by the recycling and composting systems, because a lot of the bioproducts that you see, whether it's the compost bags that people use and then put in the green bin, or it's the cups at the water fountain in their office, or it's the corn-based cutlery at the grocery store or the restaurant for takeout, people think they're doing something good. Oh my gosh, it's going to be recycled or it's going to be composted. It's not. And maybe in some places, like in San Francisco, there's Recology as an industrial composting facility. It doesn't always get composted, but at least it gets accepted and might be. In Marin County, our compost goes for landscaping and agriculture. They do not want, and they cannot process bio-based products. And so people are buying
waste management in Marin County.
Many different companies. Where I live, we have Mill Valley Refuge, which is a local company that covers a couple of cities in Marin. Marin Sanitary Service covers a big portion of Marin County and runs our dump and our hazardous waste facility. And then Recology took over for another company for West Marin and Novato. I think Waste Management runs the landfill, but I don't think collects.
I think they do actually. I went to visit there, and it's a huge operation. But it just couple, Max, I'm looking at the time. I can't believe it's almost o'clock. It's like 2 to 1. Really fast.
Well, when we get talking, we go all day. But I'll just finish my point there on the foodware ordinance, which is, sometime in 2020, maybe 2021 at the latest, it's going to be adopted by the county. And when the county adopts it, it's going to then go to each one of the cities. They've all had a chance to give input at this point, and it's going to be countywide. And yes, that took a couple of years. Yes, that took a lot of energy from advocates. But being able to not only address the foodware issue on site for dining, but also in takeout. Some communities, San Anselmo and Fairfax, not Sausalito, but those two have put even a fee on the takeout cups to encourage people to bring their own. Those are small steps that have a real impact. And so I think, in terms of what gives me that mental fortitude to keep on going, and especially in this time when we can't gather in person and can't do some of the in-person advocacy and meetings that we're used to, it's those wins that really power us forward.
Thank you. I think that, all right, sometimes we get bummed down by our losses, and it's not a failure. As I heard, just a phrase recently, it's not a failure if you learned something from it. So as long as we're learning and taking some lessons and applying them in the future, I think that's important. And also, just a quick point, because the international implications, China is not accepting plastics anymore. At least at the volumes that they were before. So we really have to reconcile and really have to face the reality that a lot of countries are stopping taking out waste and taking, sort of stopping being dumping ground basically for developed nations. I'm not just talking about the United States, but in general, for developed nations, the countries, they just don't want to deal with this anymore, and there's nowhere to go. So I think that the single-use plastics, in my opinion, have to go completely. I mean, we have to find a way to deal with the compostable plastics and how to invest in them and how to properly dispose them. I think all of that is a very important work. So thank you for doing that. I appreciate it. We started a little bit late, so I just, I want to make sure that you get a chance to there are a lot of things we could have talked about and still, but anything that you want to sort of share really fast with the people before we conclude this particular conversation.
Yeah, well, I'll just say that, for folks who are active already in the Sierra Club, I think the work that we do is really meaningful. And, I think that oftentimes, being on Sierra Club committees, you can feel like the bureaucracy of it all almost is an end in of itself, right? Oh, I'm attending these meetings, oh, I'm talking about bylaws, I'm fundraising, I'm, talking about communication streams, whether it's a newsletter in a chapter or a website or social media, is it having an effect? And the answer is after 10 years of being active in the Sierra Club, being on the Marin Group Executive Committee, starting in 2009, and then joining the SFA Chapter Executive Committee in 2016, and being on for 4 years, I can say that, yes, it is meaningful, and it does have an impact. And, we have a chance within an influential organization to endorse candidates from everything from recommending people to the local Park and Rec Commission, Planning Commission, and Sustainability Commission, training people to be effective in those places, up to President of the United States. And, that in and of itself, if we did nothing else, we're having a huge impact right there. But we do a lot else. We get people out into nature who otherwise wouldn't get out or wouldn't have a community to be with. We advocate for places that have no advocates. We partner with other organizations and do amazing work in the environmental justice field. We do amazing work in the clean energy field. We do international work. We talked a little bit about the work that the Sierra Club has done in these conference of parties every single year. And I think that, a lot of that work Sierra Club members don't exactly recognize, because you're in your own area and I'm as guilty as anyone else, right? When I was working on, the plastic bag ban in the Sierra Club Marin Group, Zero Waste Committee, right? I wasn't maybe paying attention to what was happening, in Sierra Club Virginia or Sierra Club New York. Right?
It's a big club, and we have, for those who don't know, we have chapters in every state. So, and everybody's, dealing with, well, and you're right. And what would you say to the people who are not yet with the Sierra Club?
Well, I'll say that it's easy to join, and you can opt in for as much or as little as you would like, right? And the smallest membership fee is something like $15 for an entire year. And if you don't want, to receive communication, you can easily opt out, right? You can say, no, I don't need the newsletter, from my chapter. I don't need Sierra Magazine. I don't need, emails about petitions or issues or places to donate. I don't need to do a trip. All I'm going to do is I'm going to pay $15, and that allows the Sierra Club to say that it has yet another member, another supporter. That's the minimal, right? And from there, maybe don't opt out to the newsletter, opt out everything else, but say, I'm going to get the chapter's newsletter because I'm going to see issues that are happening in my area of the world. And maybe there'll be an event or a hike or an issue that I want to be involved in or attend. And then you start to go from there. And you might join one committee. Maybe it's an ad hoc committee to plan an event.
Well, and now, Max, to your point, I mean, with COVID, I think I constantly forget myself that like there's no events or meetings.
Well, we have a lot of virtual ones, right? We have a lot of virtual ways to engage now, right?
Exactly. I mean, so now you can join us from the comfort of your own home.
Yes, exactly.
Max, thank you so much. I'm sorry to cut it short because, I think we can't talk for hours.
We can talk all day. No worries.
Exactly. We should just, mask and go on a hike. Socially distancing. Not socially, physically distancing. Like close, physically distancing.
Wave across a valley to each other. Yeah.
Right. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate all your work that you're doing, and I'm very excited to hear more about all the successes. Plastics is a huge issue. I'm very happy you're involved, and we'll see each other on the strategic planning committee that Sierra Club chapter, Sub Bay chapter is working on strategic plan for 5 years. I know it's a very interesting time to work on plans, but I think it's particularly important to actually lay some important foundations. So thank you so much for participating in that work also. And you bring very, very good and very interesting perspectives. So I appreciate that. Thank you. Have a great day. Be safe. Yeah. And thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you so much for watching, listening. It's always a pleasure to bring people whose names you probably have seen here and there, and you getting to know them firsthand. And those are the heroes, local heroes, who really changing lives for many of us. So thank you so much and have a great week until next week, hopefully. Bye.